the Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 23, Vana Parva continued. Vasampayana continued, after the chief of the Dashabhas had departed, the heroic Yudhishthira, and Bhima, and Arjuna, and the twins, each looking like unto Shiva, and Krishna, and their priest, ascending costly cars unto which were yoked excellent steeds, together went into the forest. And at time of going they distributed nishka of gold and cloths and kin unto Brahmanas versed in Siksha and Akshara and mantras, and 20 attendants followed them equipped with bows, and bowstrings, and blazing weapons, and shafts and arrows and engines of destruction. And taking the princesses' clothes and the ornaments, and the nurses and the maidservants, Indrasena speedily followed the princes on a car. And then approaching the best of Kurus, the high-minded citizens walked round him. And the principal Brahmanas of Kurujangala cheerfully saluted him. And together with his brothers, Yudhishthira the just, on his part saluted them cheerfully. And the illustrious king stopped there a little, beholding the concourse of the inhabitants of Kurujangala. And the illustrious bull among the Kurus felt for them as a father feeleth for his sons, and they too felt for the Kuru chief even as sons feel for their father. And that mighty concourse, approaching the Kuru hero, stood around him. And, O king, affected with bashfulness, and with tears in their eyes, they all exclaimed, Alas, O Lord, O Dharm! And they said, Thou art the chief of the Kurus, and the king of us, thy subjects. Where dost thou go, O just monarch, leaving all these citizens and the inhabitants of the country, like a father leaving his sons? Fie on the cruel-hearted son of Dhritarashtra! Fie on the evil-minded son of Suvala! Fie on Karna! For, O foremost of monarchs, those wretches ever wished such evil unto thee who art firm in virtue. Having thyself established the unrivaled city of Indraprastha of the splendor of Kailas itself, where dost thou go, leaving it, O illustrious and just king? O achiever of extraordinary deeds! O illustrious one, leaving that peerless palace built by Maya, which possesseth the splendor of the palace of the celestials themselves, and is like unto a celestial illusion, ever guarded by the gods, where dost thou go? O son of Dharm! And Vibhatsu, knowing the ways of virtue, pleasure, and profit, said unto them in a loud voice, Living in the forest, the king intendeth to take away the good name of his enemies. O ye with the regenerate ones at your head, versed in virtue and profit, do you approaching the ascetics separately and inclining them to grace, represent unto them what may be for our supreme good. Upon hearing these words of Arjuna, the Brahmanas and the other orders, O king, saluting him cheerfully walked round that foremost of virtuous men. And bidding farewell unto the son of Pritha, and Vrikodra, and Dhananjaya and Yajnasni, and the twins, and commanded by Yudhishthira, they returned to their respective abodes in the kingdom with heavy hearts. Thus ends the 23rd section in the Vana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 24, Vana Parva continued. Vasampayana said, after they had departed, Yudhishthira the virtuous son of Kunti, unwavering in his promises, addressed all his brothers, saying, We shall have to dwell in the solitary forest for these 12 years. Search ye, therefore, in this mighty forest for some spot abounding in birds and deer and flowers and fruits, beautiful to behold, and auspicious, and inhabited by virtuous persons, and where we may dwell pleasantly for all these years. Thus addressed by Yudhishthira, Dhananjaya replied unto the son of Dharma, after reverencing the illustrious king as if he were his spiritual preceptor. And Arjuna said, Thou hast respectfully waited upon all the great and old rishis. There is nothing unknown to thee in the world of men. And O bull of the Bharata race, thou hast always waited with reverence upon Brahmanas including Dwaipayana and others, and Narada of great ascetic merit, who with senses under control, ever goeth to the gates of all the world from the world of the gods unto that of Brahma, including that of the Gandharvas and Apsaras. And thou knowest, without doubt, the opinions of the Brahmanas and, O king, their prowess also. And O monarch, thou knowest what is calculated to do us good. And O great king, we will live wherever thou likest. Here is this lake, full of sacred water, called Dvatavna, abounding with flowers, and delightful to look at, and inhabited by many species of birds. If, O king, it pleaseth thee, here should we like to dwell these 12 years. Thinkest thou otherwise? Yudhishthira replied, O Parth, what thou hast said recommendeth itself to me. Let us go to that sacred and celebrated and large lake called Dvatavna. Vasampayana continued, Then the virtuous son of Pandu, accompanied by numerous Brahmanas, all went to the sacred lake called Dvatavna. And Yudhishthira was surrounded by numerous Brahmanas, some of whom sacrificed with fire, and some without it, and some of whom, devoted to the study of the Vedas, lived upon alms or were of the class called Vanaprasthas. And the king was also surrounded by hundreds of Mahalmas crowned with ascetic success and of rigid vows. And those bulls of the Bharata race, the sons of Pandu setting out with those numerous Brahmanas, entered the sacred and delightful woods of Dvata. And the king saw that mighty forest covered on the close of summer with salas and palms, and mangoes, and maduki, and nipi, and kadamba, and sajas, and arunas, and karnikas, many of them covered with flowers. And flocks of peacocks, and deshuhas, and chakoras, and varines, and kokilas, seated on the tops of the tallest trees of that forest were pouring forth their mellifluous notes. And the king also saw in that forest mighty herds of gigantic elephants huge as the hills, with temporal juice trickling down in the season of Rath, accompanied by herds of she-elephants. And approaching the beautiful Gogavati, Saraswati, the king saw many ascetics crowned with success in the habitations in that forest, and virtuous men of sanctified souls clad in barks of trees and bearing matted locks on their heads. And descending from their cars, the king, that foremost of virtuous men with his brothers and followers, entered that forest like Indra of immeasurable energy entering heaven. And crowds of Charanas and Siddhas desirous of beholding the monarch devoted to truth, came towards him. And the dwellers of that forest stood surrounding that lion among king possessed of great intelligence, and saluting all the Siddhas, and saluted by them in return as a king or a god should be. That foremost of virtuous men entered the forest with joined hands accompanied by all those foremost of regenerate ones. And the illustrious and virtuous king, saluted in return by those virtuous ascetics that had approached him, sat down in their midst at the foot of a mighty tree decked with flowers, like his father, Pandu, in days before. And those chiefs of the Bharata race viz. Bhima and Dhananjaya and the twins and Krishna and their followers, all fatigued, leaving their vehicles, sat themselves down around that best of kings. And that mighty tree bent down with the weight of creepers, with those 5 illustrious bowmen who had come there for rest sitting under it, looked like a mountain with 5 huge elephants resting on its side. Thus ends the 24th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 25, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Vasampayana said, having fallen into distress, those princes thus obtained at last a pleasant habitation in that forest, and there in those woods abounding with sala trees and washed by the Saraswati, they who were like so many Indras, began to sport themselves. And the illustrious king, that bull of the Kuru race, set himself to please all the Yatis and Munis and the principal Brahmanas in that forest, by offerings of excellent fruits and roots. And their priest, Dharmya, endued with great energy, like unto a father to those princes, began to perform the sacrificial rites of Ishti and Patraya for the Pandavas residing in that great forest. And there came, as a guest, unto the abode of the accomplished Pandavas living in the woods after loss of their kingdom, the old Rishi Markandeya, possessed of intense and abundant energy. And that bull of the Kuru race, the high-souled Yudhishthira, possessed of unrivaled strength and prowess, paid his homage unto that great Muni, reverenced by celestials and rishis of men, and possessed of the splendor of blazing fire. And that illustrious and all-knowing Muni, of unrivaled energy, beholding Draupadi and Yudhishthira and Bhima and Arjuna, in the midst of the ascetics, smiled, recollecting Rama in his mind. And Yudhishthira the just, apparently grieved at this, asked him, saying, all these ascetics are sorry for seeing me here. Why is it that thou alone smilest, as if in glee, in the presence of these? Markandeya replied, O child, I too am sorry and do not smile in glee. Nor doth pride born of joy possess my heart. Beholding today thy calamity, I recollect Rama, the son of Dasharatha, devoted to truth. Even that Rama, accompanied by Lakshmana, dwelt in the woods at the command of his father. O son of Pritha, I beheld him in days of old ranging with his bow on the top of the Rishyamukha hills. The illustrious Rama was like unto Indra, the lord of Yam himself, and the slayer of Namuchi. Yet that sinless one had to dwell in the forest at the command of his father, accepting it as his duty. The illustrious Rama was equal unto Sakra in prowess, and invincible in battle. And yet he had to range the forest renouncing all pleasures. Therefore should no one act unrighteously, saying, I am mighty. Kings Nabhaga and Bhagiratha and others, having subjugated by truth this world bounded by the seas, finally obtained, O child, all the regions hereafter. Therefore, should no one act unrighteously, saying, I am mighty. And, O exalted of men, the virtuous and truthful king of Kashi and Karusha was called a mad dog for having renounced his territories and riches. Therefore, should no one act unrighteously, saying, I am mighty. O best of men, O son of Pritha, the 7 righteous rishis, for having observed the ordinance prescribed by the Creator himself in the Vedas, blaze in the firmament. Therefore, should no one act unrighteously, saying, I am mighty. Behold, O king, the mighty elephants, huge as mountain cliffs and furnished with tusks, transgress not, O exalted of men, the laws of the Creator. Therefore, should none act unrighteously, saying, might is mine. And, O foremost of monarchs, behold all the creatures acting according to their species, as ordained by the Creator. Therefore, should none act unrighteously, saying, might is mine. O son of Pritha, in truth, and virtue, and proper behavior, and modesty, thou hast surpassed all creatures, and thy fame and energy are as bright as fire or the sun. Firm in thy promises, O illustrious one, having passed in the woods thy painful exile, thou wilt again, O king, snatch from the Kauravas thy blazing prosperity with the help of thy own energy. Vasampayana continued, having spoken these words unto Yudhishthira seated in the midst of the ascetics with friends, the great Rishi, having also saluted Dharmya and all the Pandavas, set out in a northerly direction. Thus ends the 25th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 26, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Vasampayana said, while the illustrious sons of Pandu continued to dwell in the Dvaita woods, that great forest became filled with Brahmanas, and the lake within that forest, ever resounding with Vedic recitations, became sacred like a second region of Brahma. And the sounds of the Yajus, the Riks, the Samas, and other words uttered by the Brahmanas, were exceedingly delightful to hear. And the Vedic recitations of the Brahmanas mingling with the twang of bows of the sons of Pritha, produced a union of the Brahmana and Kshatriya customs that was highly beautiful. And one evening the Rishi Vaka of the Dalvya family addressed Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti seated in the midst of the Rishis, saying, Behold, O chief of the Kurus, O son of Pritha, the Homa time is come of these Brahmanas devoted to ascetic austerities, the time when the sacred fires have all been lit up. These all, of rigid vows, protected by thee, are performing the rites of religion in this sacred region. The descendants of Bhrigu and Angiras, along with those of Vasishta and Kasyapa, the illustrious sons of Agastya, the offspring of Atri, all of excellent vows, in fact, all the foremost Brahmanas of the whole world, are now united with thee. Listen, O son of the Kuru race born of Kunti, thyself with thy brothers, to the words I speak to thee. As fire aided by the wind consumeth the forest, so Brahma energy mingling with Kshatriya energy, and Kshatriya might mingling with Brahma power, might, when they gathered force, consume all enemies. O child, he should never desire to be without Brahmanas who wished to subdue this and the other world for length of days. Indeed, a king slayeth his enemies having obtained a Brahmana conversant with religion and worldly affairs and freed from passion and folly. King Vali cherishing his subjects practiced those duties that lead to salvation, and knew not of any other means in this world than Brahmanas. It was for this that all the desires of Virochana's son, the Asura, Vali, were ever gratified, and his wealth was ever inexhaustible. Having obtained the whole earth through the aid of the Brahmanas, he met with destruction when he began to practice ruin on them. This earth with her wealth never adorate long as her lord a Kshatriya living without a Brahmana. The earth, however, girt by the sea, boweth unto him who is ruled by a Brahmana and taught his duties by him, like an elephant in battle without his driver. A Kshatriya destitute of Brahmanas decreaseth in strength. The Brahmanas' sight is without compare, and the Kshatriya's might also is unparalleled. When these combine, the whole earth itself cheerfully yieldeth to such a combination. As fire becoming mightier with the wind consumeth straw and wood, so kings with Brahmanas consume all foes. An intelligent Kshatriya, in order to gain what he hath not, and increase what he hath, should take counsel of Brahmanas. Therefore, O son of Kunti, for obtaining what thou hast not and increasing what thou hast, and spending what thou hast on proper objects and persons, keep thou with thee a Brahmana of reputation, of a knowledge of the Vedas, of wisdom and experience. O Yudhishthira, thou hast ever highly regarded the Brahmana. It is for this that thy fame is great and blazeth in the three worlds. Vasampayana continued, then all those Brahmanas who were with Yudhishthira worshipped Vaka of the Dalvya race, and having heard him praise Yudhishthira became highly pleased. And Dwaipayana and Narda and Jamdagnya and Prithusravas, and Indradyumna and Bhalki and Kritachetas and Sehesrapat, and Karnasvas and Munja and Lavanas and Kasyapa, and Harita and Stulakarna and Agnivesya and Soanka, and Kritavak and Suvak and Vrihadasva and Vibhavasu, and Ayadharatas and Vrishamitra and Suhotra and Hotravahana. These and many other Brahmanas of rigid vows then adored Yudhishthira like rishis adoring Purandara in heaven. Thus ends the 26th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 27, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Vasampayana said, exiled to the woods the sons of Pritha with Krishna seated in the evening, conversed with one another afflicted with sorrow and grief. And the handsome and well-informed Krishna dear unto her lords and devoted to them, thus spake unto Yudhishthira, the sinful, cruel, and wicked-minded son of Dhritarashtra certainly feeleth no sorrow for us, when, O king, that evil-hearted wretch having sent thee with myself into the woods dressed in deerskins feeleth no regret. The heart of that wretch of evil deeds must surely be made of steel when he could at that time address thee, his virtuous eldest brother, in words so harsh. Having brought thee who deservest to enjoy every happiness and never such woe, into such distress, alas, that wicked-minded and sinful wretch joyeth with his friends. O Bharata, when dressed in deerskin thou hast set out for the woods, only 4 persons, O monarch, viz. Duryodhana, Karna, the evil-minded Sakuni, and Dasasana that bad and fierce brother of Duryodhana, did not shed tears. With the exception of these, O thou best of the Kurus, all other Kurus filled with sorrow shed tears from their eyes. Beholding this thy bed and recollecting what thou hadst before, I grieve, O king, for thee who deservest not woe and hast been brought up in every luxury. Remembering that seat of ivory in thy court, decked with jewels, and beholding this seat of kusa grass, grief consumeth me, O king. I saw thee, O king, surrounded in thy court by kings. What peace can my heart know in not beholding thee such now? I beheld thy body, effulgent as the sun, decked with sandal paste. Alas, grief depriveth me of my senses in beholding thee now besmeared with mud and dirt. I saw thee before, O king, dressed in silken clothes of pure white. But I now behold thee dressed in rags. Formerly, O king, pure food of every kind was carried from thy house on plates of gold for Brahmanas by thousands. And, O king, food also of the best kind was formerly given by thee unto ascetics both houseless and living in domesticity. Formerly, living in thy mansion thou hadst ever filled with food of every kind, plates by thousands, and worshipped the Brahmanas gratifying every wish of theirs. What peace, O king, can my heart know in not beholding all this now? And, O great king, these thy brothers, endued with youth and decked with earrings, were formerly fed by cooks with food of the sweet flavor and dressed with skill. Alas, O king, I now behold them all, so undeserving of woe, living in the woods and upon what the woods may yield. My heart, O king, knoweth no peace. Thinking of this Bhimsena living in sorrow in the woods, doth not thy anger blaze up, even though it is time? Why doth not thy anger, O king, blaze up upon beholding the illustrious Bhimsena who ever performeth everything unaided, so fallen into distress, though deserving of every happiness. Why, O king, doth not thy anger blaze up on beholding that Bhima living in the woods, who was formerly surrounded with numerous vehicles and dressed in costly apparel? This exalted personage is ready to slay all the Kurus in battle. He beareth, however, all this sorrow, only because he waiteth for the fulfillment of thy promise. This Arjuna, O king, though possessed of two hands, is equal, for the lightness of his hand in discharging shafts, to Kartavirya Arjuna of 1,000 arms. He is even to foes, like unto Yam himself at the end of the Yuga. It was by the prowess of his weapons that all the kings of the earth were made to wait upon the Brahmanas at thy sacrifice. Beholding that Arjuna, that tiger among men worshipped by both the celestials and the Danvas so anxious, why, O king, dost thou not feel indignant? I grieve, O Bharata, that thy wrath doth not blaze up at sight of that son of Pritha in exile, that prince who deserveth not such distress and who hath been brought up in every luxury. Why doth not thy wrath blaze up at sight of that Arjuna in exile, who, on a single car, hath vanquished celestials and men and serpents? Why, O king, doth not thy wrath blaze up at sight of that Arjuna in exile who, honored with offerings of cars and vehicles of various forms and horses and elephants, forcibly took from the kings of the earth their treasures, who is the chastiser of all foes, and who at one impetus can throw full 500 arrows? Why, O king, doth not thy wrath blaze up at sight of Nakula, in exile, who, so fair and able-bodied and young, is the foremost of all swordsmen? Why, O king, dost thou pardon the foe, O Yudhishthira? At sight of Madri's son, the handsome and brave Sahdeva in exile? Why doth not thy anger blaze up, O king, at sight of both Nakula and Sahdeva overwhelmed with grief, though so undeserving of distress? Why also, O king, dost thou pardon the foe at sight of myself in exile who, born in the race of Drupta and, therefore, the sister of Drishtadayumna, am the daughter-in-law of the illustrious Pandu and the devoted wife of heroes? Truly, O thou best of the Bharatas, thou hast no anger, else why is it that thy mind is not moved at sight of thy brothers and myself in such distress? It is said that there is no Kshatriya in the world who is bereft of anger. I now behold in thee, however, a refutation of the proverb. That Kshatriya, O son of Pritha, who discovereth not his energy when the opportunity cometh, is ever disregarded by all creatures. Therefore, O king, thou shouldst not extend thy forgiveness to the foe. Indeed, with thy energy, without doubt, thou mayst slay them all. So also, O king, that Kshatriya who is not appeased when the time for forgiveness cometh, becometh unpopular with every creature and meeteth with destruction both in this and the other world. Thus ends the 27th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 28, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Draupadi continued, on this subject, the ancient story of the conversation between Prahlad and Vali, the son of Virochana, is quoted as an example. One day Vali asked his grandfather Prahlad, the chief of the Asuras and the Danvas, possessed of great wisdom and well-versed in the mysteries of the science of duty, saying, O sire, is forgiveness meritorious, or might and energy such? I am puzzled as regards this, O sire, enlighten me who ask thee this. O thou conversant with all duties, tell me truly which of these is meritorious. I will strictly obey whatever thy command may be. Thus asked by Vali, his wise grandfather, conversant with every conclusion, replied upon the whole subject unto his grandson who had sought at his hands the resolution of his doubts. And Prahlad said, "Know, O child, these two truths with certainty, viz., that might is not always meritorious and forgiveness also is not always meritorious. He that forgiveth always suffereth many evils. Servants and strangers and enemies always disregard him. No creature ever bendeth down unto him. Therefore it is, O child, that the learned applaud not a constant habit of forgiveness. The servants of an ever-forgiving person always disregard him, and contract numerous faults. These mean-minded men also seek to deprive him of his wealth, while sold servants also appropriate to themselves his vehicles and clothes and ornaments and apparel and beds and seats and food and drink and other articles of use. They do not also at the command of their master, give unto others the things they are directed to give. Nor do they ever worship their master with that respect which is their master's due. Disregard in this world is worse than death. O child, sons and servants and attendants and even strangers speak harsh words unto the man who always forgiveth. Persons, disregarding the man of an ever-forgiving temper, even desire his wife, and his wife also, becometh ready to act as she willeth. And servants also that are ever fond of pleasure, if they do not receive even slight punishments from their master, contract all sorts of vices, and the wicked ever injure such a master. These and many other demerits attached to those that are ever forgiving. Listen now, O son of Virochna, to the demerits of those that are never forgiving. The man of wrath who, surrounded by darkness, always inflicteth, by help of his own energy, various kinds of punishment on persons whether they deserve them or not, is necessarily separated from his friends in consequence of that energy of his. Such a man is hated by both relatives and strangers. Such a man, because he insulteth others, suffereth loss of wealth and reapeth disregard and sorrow and hatred and confusion and enemies. The man of wrath, in consequence of his ire, inflicteth punishments on men and obtaineth in return harsh words. He is divested of his prosperity soon and even of life, not to say, of friends and relatives. He that putteth forth his might both upon his benefactor and his foe, is an object of alarm to the world, like a snake that hath taken shelter in a house, to the inmates thereof. What prosperity can he have who is an object of alarm to the world? People always do him an injury when they find a hole. Therefore, should men never exhibit might in excess nor forgiveness on all occasion. One should put forth his might and show his forgiveness on proper occasion. He that becometh forgiving at the proper time and harsh and mighty also at the proper time, obtaineth happiness both in this world and the other. I shall now indicate the occasion in detail of forgiveness, as laid down by the learned, and which should ever be observed by all. Hearken unto me as I speak. He that hath done thee a service, even if he is guilty of a grave wrong unto thee, recollecting his former service, shouldst thou forgive that offender. Those also that have become offenders from ignorance and folly should be forgiven, for learning and wisdom are not always easily attainable by man. They that having offended thee knowingly while pleading ignorance should be punished, even if their offences be trivial. Such crooked men should never be pardoned. The first offence of every creature should be forgiven. The second offence, however, should be punished, even if it be trivial. If, however, a person committeth an offence unwillingly, it hath been said that examining his plea well, by a judicious enquiry, he should be pardoned. Humility may vanquish might, humility may vanquish weakness. There is nothing that humility may not accomplish. Therefore, humility is truly fiercer than it seemeth. One should act with reference to place and time, taking note of his own might or weakness. Nothing can succeed that hath been undertaken without reference to place and time. Therefore, do thou ever wait for place and time. Sometimes offenders should be forgiven from fear of the people. These have been declared to be times of forgiveness. And it hath been said that on occasion besides these, might should be put forth against transgressors. Draupadi continued, I therefore regard, O king, that the time hath come for thee to put forth thy might. Unto those Kurus the covetous sons of Dhritarashtra, who injure us always, the present is not the time for forgiveness. It behoveth thee to put forth thy might. The humble and forgiving person is disregarded, while those that are fierce persecute others. He, indeed, is a king who hath recourse to both, each according to its time. Thus ends the 28th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 29, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Yudhishthira said, Anger is the slayer of men and is again their prosperer. Know this, O thou possessed of great wisdom, that anger is the root of all prosperity and all adversity. O thou beautiful one, he that suppresseth his anger earneth prosperity. That man, again, who always giveth way to anger, reapeth adversity from his fierce anger. It is seen in this world that anger is the cause of destruction of every creature. How then can one like me indulge his anger which is so destructive of the world? The angry man committeth sin. The angry man killeth even his preceptors. The angry man insulteth even his superiors in harsh words. The man that is angry faileth to distinguish between what should be said and what should not. There is no act that an angry man may not do, no word that an angry man may not utter. From anger a man may slay one that deserveth not to be slain, and may worship one that deserveth to be slain. The angry man may even send his own soul to the regions of Yam. Beholding all these faults, the wise control their anger, desirous of obtaining high prosperity both in this and the other world. It is for this that they, of tranquil souls, have banished wrath. How can one like us indulge in it then? O daughter of Drupta, reflecting upon all this, my anger is not excited. One that acteth not against a man whose wrath hath been up, rescueth himself as also others from great fear. In fact, he may be regarded to be the physician of the two, himself an angry man. If a weak man persecuted by others, foolishly becometh angry towards men that are mightier than he then becometh himself the cause of his own destruction. And in respect of one who thus deliberately throweth away his life, there are no regions hereafter to gain. Therefore, O daughter of Drupta, it hath been said that a weak man should always suppress his wrath. And the wise man also, who though persecuted, suffereth not his wrath to be roused, joyeth in the other world, having passed his persecutor over in indifference. It is for this reason hath it been said that a wise man, whether strong or weak, should ever forgive his persecutor even when the latter is the straits. It is for this, O Krishna, that the virtuous applaud them that have conquered their wrath. Indeed, it is the opinion of the virtuous that the honest and forgiving man is ever victorious. Truth is more beneficial than untruth, and gentleness than cruel behavior. How can one like me, therefore, even for the purpose of slaying Duryodhan, exhibit anger which hath so many faults and which the virtuous banish from their souls? They that are regarded by the learned of foresight, as possessed of true force of character, are certainly those who are wrathful in outward show only. Men of learning and of true insight call him to be possessed of force of character, who by his wisdom can suppress his risen wrath. O thou of fair hips, the angry man seeth not things in their true light. The man that is angry seeth not his way, nor respecteth persons. The angry man killeth even those that deserve not to be killed. The man of wrath slayeth even his preceptors. Therefore, the man possessing force of character should ever banish wrath to a distance. The man that is overwhelmed with wrath acquireth not with ease generosity, dignity, courage, skill, and other attributes belonging to real force of character. A man by forsaking anger can exhibit proper energy, whereas, O wise one, it is highly difficult for the angry man to exhibit his energy at the proper time. The ignorant always regard anger as equivalent to energy. Wrath, however, hath been given to man for the destruction of the world. The man, therefore, who wisheth to behave properly, must ever forsake anger. Even one who hath abandoned the excellent virtues of his own order, it is certain, never indulgeth in wrath if he behaveth properly. If fools, of minds without light, transgress in every respect, how, O faultless one, can one like me transgress like them? If amongst men there were not persons equal unto the earth in forgiveness, there would be no peace among men but continued strife caused by wrath. If the injured return their injuries, if one chastised by his superiors were to chastise his superior in return, the consequence would be the destruction of every creature, and sin also would prevail in the world. If the man who hath ill speeches from another, returneth those speeches afterwards, if the injured man returneth his injuries, if the chastised person chastiseth in return, if fathers slay sons, and sons, fathers, and if husbands slay wives, and wives husbands, then, O Krishna, how can birth take place in a world where anger prevaileth so? For, O thou of handsome face, know that the birth of creatures is due to peace. If the kings also, O Draupadi, giveth way to wrath, his subjects soon meet with destruction. Wrath, therefore, hath for its consequence the destruction and the distress of the people. And because it is seen that there are in the world men who are forgiving like the earth, it is therefore that creatures derive their life and enjoy prosperity. O beautiful one should forgive under every injury. It hath been said that the continuation of species is due to man being forgiving. He, indeed, is a wise and excellent person who hath conquered his wrath and who showeth forgiveness even when insulted, oppressed, and angered by a strong person. The man of power who controlleth his wrath, hath for his enjoyment numerous everlasting regions, while he that is angry, is called foolish, and meeteth with destruction both in this and the other world. O Krishna, the illustrious and forgiving Kashyapa hath, in this respect, sung the following verses in honor of men that are ever forgiving. Forgiveness is virtue, forgiveness is sacrifice, forgiveness is the Vedas, forgiveness is the Shruti. He that knoweth this is capable of forgiving everything. Forgiveness is Brahma, forgiveness is truth, forgiveness is stored ascetic merit, forgiveness protecteth the ascetic merit of the future, forgiveness is asceticism, forgiveness is holiness, and by forgiveness is it that the universe is held together. Persons that are forgiving attain to the regions obtainable by those that have performed meritorious sacrifices, or those that are well conversant with the Vedas, or those that have high ascetic merit. those that perform Vedic sacrifices as also those that perform the meritorious rites of religion obtain other regions. Men of forgiveness, however, obtain those much adored regions that are in the world of Brahma. Forgiveness is the might of the mighty, forgiveness is sacrifice, forgiveness is quiet of mind. How, O Krishna, can one like us abandon forgiveness, which is such, and in which are established Brahma, and truth, and wisdom and the worlds? The man of wisdom should ever forgive, for when he is capable of forgiving everything he attaineth to Brahma. The world belongeth to those that are forgiving, the other world is also theirs. The forgiving acquire honors here, and a state of blessedness hereafter. Those men that ever conquer their wrath by forgiveness, obtain the higher regions. Therefore hath it been said that forgiveness is the highest virtue. These are the verses sung by Kasyapa in respect of those that are ever forgiving. Having listened, O Draupadi, to these verses in respect of forgiveness, content thyself. Give not way to thy wrath. Our grandsire, the son of Santanu, will worship peace. Krishna, the son of Devaki, will worship peace. The preceptor, Drona, and Vidura called Kshatri will both speak of peace. Kripa and Sanjay also will preach peace. And Somadeta and Yuyutshu and Drona's son and our grandsire Vyasa, every one of them speaketh always of peace. Ever urged by these towards peace, the king Dhritarashtra will, I think, return us our kingdom. If however he yieldeth to temptation, he will meet with destruction. O lady, a crisis hath come in the history of Bharatas for plunging them into calamity. This hath been my certain conclusion from some time before. Suyodhana deserveth not the kingdom. Therefore hath he been unable to acquire forgiveness. I, however, deserve the sovereignty, and therefore is it that forgiveness hath taken possession of me. Forgiveness and gentleness are the qualities of the self-possessed. They represent eternal virtue. I shall, therefore, truly adopt those qualities. Thus ends the 29th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 30, Arjun Vigamna Parva continued. Draupadi said, I bow down unto Dhatri and Vidhatri, who have thus clouded thy sense. Regarding the burden thou art to bear, thou thinkest differently from the ways of thy fathers and grandfathers. Influenced by acts, men are placed in different situations of life. Acts, therefore, produce consequences that are inevitable. Emancipation is desired from mere folly. It seemeth that man can never attain prosperity in this world by virtue, gentleness, forgiveness, straightforwardness and fear of censure. If this were not so, O Bharata, this insufferable calamity would never have overtaken thee who art so undeserving of it, and these thy brothers of great energy. Neither in those days of prosperity, nor in these days of thy adversity, thou, O Bharata, hast ever known anything so dear to thee as virtue, which thou hast even regarded as dearer to thee than life. That thy kingdom is for virtue alone, that thy life also is for virtue alone, is known to Brahmanas and thy superiors and even the celestials. I think thou canst abandon Bhimsena and Arjuna and these twin sons of Madri along with myself, but thou canst not abandon virtue. I have heard that the king protecteth virtue, and virtue, protected by him, protecteth him in return. I see, however, that virtue protecteth thee not. Like the shadow pursuing a man, thy heart, O tiger among men, with singleness of purpose, ever seeketh virtue. Thou hast never disregarded thy equals, and inferiors and superiors, obtaining even the entire world, thy pride never increased. O son of Pritha, thou ever worshippest Brahmanas, and gods, and the Pitris, with Swaha and Swadas, and other forms of worship. O son of Pritha, thou hast ever gratified the Brahmanas by fulfilling every wish of theirs. Yatis and sannyasins and mendicants of domestic lives have always been fed in thy house from of plates of gold where I have distributed food amongst them. Unto the vanaprasthas thou always givest gold and food. There is nothing in thy house thou mayest not give unto the Brahmanas. In the Viswadeva sacrifice, that is, for thy peace, performed in thy house, the things consecrated are first offered unto guests and all creatures while thou livest thyself with what remaineth after distribution. Ishtis Pashubandhas, sacrifices for obtaining fruition of desires, the religious rites of ordinary domesticity, Paka sacrifices, and sacrifices of other kinds, are ever performed in thy house. Even in this great forest, so solitary and haunted by robbers, living in exile, divested of thy kingdom, thy virtue hath sustained no diminution. The Ashwamedha, the Rajasuya, the Pundarika and Gosava, these grand sacrifices requiring large gifts have all been performed by thee. O monarch, impelled by a perverse sense during that dire hour of a losing match at dice, thou didst yet stake and lose thy kingdom, thy wealth, thy weapons, thy brothers, and myself. Simple, gentle, liberal, modest, truthful, how, O king, could thy mind be attracted to the vice of gambling? I am almost deprived of my sense, O king, and my heart is overwhelmed with grief, beholding this thy distress, and this thy calamity. An old history is cited as an illustration for the truth that men are subjects to the will of God and never to their own wishes. The Supreme Lord and Ordainer of all ordaineth everything in respect of the weal and woe, the happiness and misery, of all creatures, even prior to their births, guided by the acts of each, which are even like a seed destined to sprout forth into the tree of life. O hero amongst men, as a wooden doll is made to move its limbs by the wire puller, so are creatures made to work by the Lord of all. O Bharata, like space that covereth every object, God, pervading every creature, ordaineth its weal or woe. Like a bird tied with a string, every creature is dependent on God. Every one is subject to God and none else. No one can be his own ordainer. Like a pearl on its string, or a bull held fast by the cord passing through its nose, or a tree fallen from the bank into the middle of the stream, every creature followeth the command of the Creator, because imbued with his spirit and because established in him. And man himself, dependent on the universal soul, cannot pass a moment independently. Enveloped in darkness, creatures are not masters of their own weal or woe. They go to heaven or hell urged by God himself. Like light straws dependent on strong winds, all creatures, O Bharata, are dependent on God. And God himself, pervading all creatures and engaged in acts right and wrong, moveth in the universe, though none can say this is God. This body with its physical attributes is only the means by which God the Supreme Lord of all maketh every creature to reap fruits that are good or bad. Behold the power of illusion that hath been spread by God, who confounding with his illusion, maketh creatures slay their fellows. Truth-knowing Munis behold those differently. They appear to them in a different light, even like the rays of the sun, which to ordinary eyes are only a pencil of light, while to eyes more penetrating seem fraught with the germs of food and drink. Ordinary men behold the things of the earth otherwise. It is God who maketh them all, adopting different processes in their creation and destruction. And Yudhishthira, the self-create grandsire, Almighty God, spreading illusion, slayeth his creatures by the instrumentality of his creatures, as one may break a piece of inert and senseless wood with wood, or stone with stone, or iron with iron. And the Supreme Lord, according to his pleasure, sporteth with his creatures, creating and destroying them, like a child with his toy of soft earth. O King, it doth seem to me that God behaveth towards his creatures like a father or mother unto them. Like a vicious person, he seemeth to bear himself towards them in anger. Beholding superior and well-behaved and modest persons persecuted, while the sinful are happy, I am sorely troubled. Beholding this thy distress and the prosperity of Suyodhana, I do not speak highly of the great ordainer who suffereth such inequality. Sir, what fruits doth the great ordainer reap by granting prosperity to Dhritarashtra's son who transgresseth the ordinances, who is crooked and covetous, and who injureth virtue and religion? If the act done pursueth the doer and none else, then certainly it is God himself who is stained with the sin of every act. If however, the sin of an act done doth not attach to the doer, then individual might and not God is the true cause of acts, and I grieve for those that have no might. Thus ends the 30th section in the Arjun Vigamna Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.